D2C insurance, slotting fees, and coolers. This is getting pretty wonky in terms of subject matter, but I find it's actually the devil is in the details for these things. And for those of you who were part of the panel on beer this morning, part of the challenge of, if we're going to go into THC beverage, which is what this one's going to focus on, it doesn't neatly fit in a category. It's not non-alc, it's not alcohol. It's, as we've learned, running on alcohol rails. But there are some ways in which regulations have not yet caught up to these realities. And so these topics, these wonky topics, are examples of this, the details, the gritty details that need to be worked out. And they're going to get worked out eventually. Our hope is that by talking about it, by being aware of these problems, they're not all problems, some of these are true opportunities, that we can collectively kind of push this forward. So this is like the bleeding edge here. So I'll give each panelist a chance to introduce themselves, and maybe you say which of these topics matters most to you. How about that?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kast. I'm senior counsel at DoorDash. Prior to joining DoorDash, I was in the alcohol industry working for a company called Proximo Spirits. In that role, really became acutely aware of the alcohol regulatory framework. Came on board to DoorDash about 3 years ago. Initially, my scope was all alcohol regulatory, but when we made the move into hemp THC more recently, I expanded that into my scope. And really excited to talk to you all here today about some of the topics this panel is going to be going over and how DoorDash fits into that.
The first topic, I'm going to go back to you, Ken Daley. It's important that people understand that there is something called trade spend in the world of, say, grocery and CPG. Let's say I'm Kellogg's, or let's say I'm Coca-Cola. It means that I can pay my grocer or my retailer various fees to get better or preferred placement on the shelf. These are often referred to as slotting fees. The reason why certain products are on an end cap or at the kind of the end of the aisle is because people pay for that privilege. That's like the most valuable real estate that you can have in a grocery store.
So we can't have any financial interest in a retailer that sells our product. We can't offer them aid or assistance. It's one of the ways that the tiers maintain that separation. A manufacturer can't do it as well. They can't hop tiers, and they can't have an ownership interest in us. Almost every state's got a 3-tier system, but there are nuances state by state. But refrigerated equipment is illegal to give. It isn't just that they say, okay, you can't write that person a check for $5,000. You also can't give them things like refrigeration.
Like
right?
a cooler in a store.
Yeah, coolers and any of that.
Yes, this was born in liquor stores. We're talking about THC beverage, and it's moving into these other retail trade environments. My fear or expectation is that some of those retail players are going to be like, doesn't look like alcohol. That looks like something that I can get a slotting fee on. And so thank you very much. We're not going to do business unless you pay me. So this is an undecided and open question.
And this is going to be a general comment, not attributable to DoorDash, just as a nerd of the alcohol industry and the history of it. But I just want to stress caution of just carte blanche, like proceeding to regulate these products in the same way that alcohol is.
Fair.
There were rules that were set up specifically to address the situation that was going on in the country before Prohibition and to try and prevent that situation from occurring again. The issue with slotting fees was to preserve retailer independence and so that manufacturers couldn't dominate them and tell them how to do their business. That was a rule that was needed at the time and has served us well in the alcohol industry, but I'm just stressing caution with regard to rushing to adopt all the same rules.
Does it have to be exactly like alcohol? I think my takeaway from all these conversations is no, it's not. It's not exactly like it. So I want to now transition a little bit and now talk about insurance. So James, can you kind of walk us through what is the state of play right now in terms of insurance? Where are some of the constraints to this category, and where do you see this going in the future?
I think as it relates to beverages, that is the part of cannabis insurance that is the furthest behind. And it's a huge problem. And to double click on that even further, the part that is even further behind within that is on-premise consumption. It's a problem because, if you go to a bar, you've got somebody drinking a Bud Light and a can or something like that. They leave the bar. God forbid the worst happens, right? It all comes down to claims litigation.
Who's
right?
at fault?
Yeah, who's at fault?
And who pays Who pays who for what reason?
Exactly. The reality is that I'm going to get sued, and potentially one of the alcohol companies is going to get. We're both going to be co-defendants, right, in claims litigation.
Because we won't be able to say it's between the beer or the THC drink that caused this person to get in an accident.
Yes, but there are more mechanisms to put more of the blame on alcohol right now. It's about case law, and it's about intoxication tests as well. You can draw someone's blood at the scene of an accident, on and on and on. That framework is just much more robust for alcohol.
Now I'm going to transition to talk about D2C, because this is another kind of open question. And so while D2C is an amazing path for building brand awareness, I think the other side of that coin is that you don't ultimately know the person who is transacting with you unless you really know who they are.
I think there still needs a lot of progress to be made, and I think DoorDash are doing a really, really good job on leading on that front, and it's kind of setting the standard.
We had the benefit of several years of being in the alcohol delivery business, or facilitating the delivery of those products, and a lot of learnings throughout that period to be able to build a product and team that, for the most part, could be transmuted over to the hemp THC side of things for at least the intoxicating beverages, as well as even non-intoxicating ones. Of course, there are several additional steps that we implemented in processes for this particular industry on top of that, but one of the things that we could really rely on are the age verification protocols, processes that we had in place, both from the teams, the people on our team that are working toward making sure the system works, and the technology that we've implemented. And the way that I like to describe these processes is just waves upon waves of throughout the ordering experience of the consumer, and also when the dasher is going to pick up the product and on the way to the consumer, so that both the consumer and the dasher are 100% aware of what's going to need to happen when they get to the consumer's address. Before the consumer can even check out, they're doing the age attestation and making sure that that expectation is like, you're going to need to be at the door, you're going to need an ID, you can't be displaying any signs of intoxication. Right, but I want to go back to what happens at the door, because what we have in place is a 4-step compliance check that the dasher has to go through during every single delivery. That includes 2 ID checks, one which leverages advanced technology that is based upon advanced machine learning logic that can run a series of checks on a barcode that really ferrets out any sort of illegitimate IDs, a sobriety check, and then all of those 3 steps pass. Do they go on to the final one? The dasher's prompted to hand it over to the consumer. Now, if any of those fail, it triggers like an abandonment flow, in which the dasher is prompted with step-by-step prompts to get that product back to the retailer from which the product was originally picked up. And we've been, on the alcohol side and now on the hemp THC side, we've been really seeing the dividends that investments have paid off over time, where when we're working with alcohol regulatory agencies and getting the data with regard to how their stings run, almost every single time outpacing the national standard from the big box stores and how they perform in this area. And so we're seeing, again, those investments really pay off, and we think that that's bringing those industry-leading standards over to this market is really important, as it's in its nascent stages, and we really need to make sure that our operations are completely above board.
And what I really want people to take home is that that can easily be taken away too. And a lot of the theme of the last 2 days has been about this concept of self-regulation. If regulators are not able to catch up with where the consumer is and where we are, then we have to do what's right and what's going to protect the integrity of this industry for the long term. So first, just thank you and thank DoorDash for being such a proponent of this industry. It's huge that you guys are involved, and I really appreciate that.
This is also how it happened in alcohol in post-prohibition. The regulations didn't exist, so the alcohol industry came together to decide we are going to restrict advertising to minors. And so there's been a couple of examples in history where the industry itself has had to regulate themselves in order for the regulators to catch up. Happened in gaming as well. There was very violent games that came out, and there was no rating system that existed. And there was a little bit of enforcement action that happened, and then the gaming industry came together and said, okay, we're going to create a ranking system and kind of put these games against it, and then try and put different ages related to the games.